Harley's declines are certainly worse than the overall U.S. industry, but motorcycle sales in general are down this year as well. So, but there's,
Harley-Davidson is on the edge of fading away, and the 7 motorcycles I'm covering here have already disappeared because almost no one was buying them anymore. What makes it even more unfortunate is that these bikes were once well liked and popular, but Harley, sticking to its usual stubborn ways, refused to adapt to changing times. Now the company is left paying the price. Keep watching until the end, because the final bike on this list is so surprising, you'll wonder how Harley even decided to release it in the first place. Number 7 is the Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 Iron, which for years served as the entry point into the Harley brand. This was the bike that told riders, "Welcome to Harley-Davidson." It was aimed at beginners taking their first step into the lineup and older riders hoping to relive their youth. Released in 2009, the 883 Iron had a simple design, but over time, that simplicity turned into outdatedness. The bike was powered by an old air-cooled engine that never saw modern updates. It lacked essentials that newer riders expected, like ABS brakes, traction control, or selectable riding modes. What it offered instead was a bare-bones, old-school feel that simply didn't keep up with the rest of the motorcycle world. As emission standards tightened with Euro 5 regulations, the 883 Iron couldn't meet them, and Harley had no choice but to discontinue it. The final units in North America were sold off quietly in late 2022. Back in 2015, sales were strong at more than 14,000 units, but by 2022, they had collapsed to fewer than 2,000. Dealers themselves seemed eager to move them off the floor and out of sight. The Sportster 883 Iron went from being Harley's introduction bike to something they quietly swept under the rug. And if you think the 883 Iron had lost its usefulness, just wait until you see the next motorcycle on the list. It's even harder to believe Harley put it out at all. Number 6 is the Harley-Davidson 48. It has the looks, but not much practicality. The Harley 48 was designed to catch attention with its style rather than its performance. Released in 2010, it featured a tiny gas tank and a low, stripped-down design, aiming to capture the vibe of an old-school street bike. It looked cool in photos and had that retro appeal, but when it came to riding, it didn't make much sense. With only a 2.1-gallon fuel tank, the range was about 70 to 90 miles, which meant constant stops for gas if you wanted to ride beyond the neighborhood. The bike never evolved either. Harley didn't update it with new features or technology. It continued to run on the same old 1,202 cubic centimeter Evolution engine, without traction control, without modern suspension, and without anything to make it competitive in today's market. What you got was a lot of vibration and a vintage aesthetic, but not much else. By 2023, it was no longer sold in Europe, and in early 2024, it quietly disappeared from the US lineup as well. There was no farewell announcement or recognition. It was simply dropped. In the end, the 48 was more about looks than substance, and instead of winning riders over, it ended up pushing them away. Number 5 is the Harley-Davidson Fat Bob 114, a model that ended up being far too radical for Harley's core audience. It entered the lineup like a troublemaker, designed to stand out with its aggressive styling and bold features. The Fat Bob 114 came equipped with a big, powerful engine, oversized tires, inverted front forks, and a headlight that looked more futuristic than anything Harley riders were used to seeing. But instead of being embraced, most longtime Harley fans turned away from it. They felt it was too modern, too strange, almost like handing something unfamiliar to someone who never asked for change. At launch, it was seen as edgy and eye-catching, but being bold didn't translate into long-term success. Harley put a lot of effort into advertising the Fat Bob between 2018 and 2020, trying to build hype around its unconventional style. By 2023, however, the company had nearly abandoned it. The bike was hardly featured in promotional materials anymore, and even dealerships showed little enthusiasm for selling it. Sales collapsed from 10,300 units worldwide in 2019 to just 2,200 in 2023, a dramatic drop. Owners who bought one new watched the value sink quickly, with some losing around 40% in only 2 years. Industry guides like Kelley Blue Book even suggested it was a poor investment. In the end, the Fat Bob 114 didn't just miss the mark, it fell flat in spectacular fashion, proving to be more of a reckless gamble than a success. Number 4 is the original Harley-Davidson Livewire, an expensive electric bike that completely flopped. It stands as the perfect example of Harley's overconfidence. Back in 2019, they stepped into the electric motorcycle market with bold claims that this was the future of riding, but the price tag told a different story. Nearly $30,000 for a bike carrying the Harley name, aimed at customers who still resisted basic modern updates like fuel injection. Dealers didn't know how to push it, some wouldn't even stock it, and buyers stayed away. Few people wanted test rides, insurance costs were high, and charging problems appeared right from the beginning. The results were shocking. In 2020, Harley sold only 480 Livewires, not even enough to fill a small section of a stadium. Panicking, they rebranded the project in 2021, turning it into a separate company called Livewire, and renaming the bike the Livewire 1 with a lowered price of $22,799. But even with the discount, sales barely reached 1,000 bikes in the US by 2023. To make matters worse, there was a recall in 2020 due to software glitches and battery charging failures, which made early buyers question Harley's ability to deliver a reliable product. The entire venture felt like watching a rocket launch only to see it veer off course. Harley tried to blend traditional styling with the idea of long-distance riding, but the outcome was a motorcycle that didn't know what it wanted to be. Number 3 is the Harley-Davidson Pan America 1250, which always felt a little out of place in the lineup as an adventure bike. Harley took a big swing with this one, trying to break into the adventure touring segment dominated by brands like BMW and Ducati. On paper, the Pan America 1250 looked promising. It packed 150 horsepower, came with an advanced electronic suspension system, had a large modern display, and carried a rugged design meant to look tough enough for long journeys. It was Harley's first serious attempt at an ADV bike, and in theory, it could have been a game changer, but the reality didn't match the ambition. Harley's traditional customers didn't really know what to make of it. Riders who loved cruisers and touring bikes weren't drawn to the Pan America's off-road personality, and the adventure bike community wasn't fully convinced Harley could deliver a product that belonged in that world. In 2023, sales told the story clearly. Only 5,200 Pan Americas were sold worldwide. When you compare that to BMW, which sold more than 60,000 GS models in the same period, the gap is staggering. Harley's effort didn't just fall short, it was barely even in the same league. A big part of the problem was the dealerships. Harley dealers are experts at selling chrome, leather saddlebags, and the image of classic American cruising. But when it came to explaining things like suspension travel, riding modes, or off-road handling, they were out of their element. It was like walking into a steakhouse and being offered vegan food. It just didn't feel natural. Even motorcycle reviewers who gave the Pan America some credit admitted that it seemed uncertain about its identity. Some said it was basically a cruiser dressed up as a dirt bike, and hardcore adventure riders dismissed it as not being a serious competitor. The bike briefly caught attention when it first launched, pulling in curious riders, but the excitement faded fast. It didn't hold its place in the market, and it quietly slipped into the background. Harley tried to expand into a new territory, but instead of establishing themselves, they ended up looking lost. And if you think that's bad, stick around, because the next mistake makes this one look even more embarrassing. Second, we come to the Harley-Davidson Street 500 and 750, a pair of motorcycles that were supposed to open the door for new riders, but ended up leaving most people disappointed. Introduced in 2014, these models were Harley's attempt to capture a younger market by offering something smaller, more affordable, and easier to handle. On paper, the idea made sense. Create an entry-level Harley that could work well in urban settings and appeal to first-time buyers. But in practice, the execution fell flat. Instead of coming across as fun and budget-friendly, the Street 500 and 750 felt cheap in ways that were impossible to ignore. The Street 500 carried a price tag of around $6,999, while the Street 750 came in at about $7,499, which might have seemed reasonable at first glance. The problem wasn't just the cost, it was what buyers actually got for that money. Riders complained about poor build quality, braking issues that felt unsafe, clunky gear shifts, and an engine sound that lacked the signature Harley growl. These weren't quirks that could be overlooked. They were flaws that made the bikes feel like watered-down versions of what a Harley should be. For many customers, these bikes simply didn't have the authentic Harley-Davidson soul. They lacked the weight, the sound, and the presence that made the brand iconic. Production took place both in the United States and in India, but neither market responded well. Instead of becoming a global success story, the Street Series became a global disappointment. Riders from different countries reached the same conclusion. These bikes didn't deliver the Harley experience they expected. By 2021, Harley-Davidson quietly ended production of both models without much fanfare. There was no grand announcement, no farewell marketing campaign, just a quiet disappearance that spoke volumes about how poorly they had performed. For a company already struggling to modernize and stay relevant, the failure of the Street 500 and 750 was another blow to its image. And just when it seems like Harley couldn't stumble any further, there's still one more example worth mentioning. First, there's the Harley-Davidson Softail Standard, a motorcycle that has almost faded completely from memory. It's not just that riders lost interest in it. Harley itself acted as though the bike didn't exist. When it was introduced in 2020, the Softail Standard was supposed to be a stripped-down, entry-level cruiser designed for easy customization. The idea was simple: give riders a blank canvas they could build on. But the reality turned out to be far less exciting. The bike was so plain and unremarkable that most people didn't even feel inspired to customize it at all. The features were bare bones to the point of being forgettable. It had no modern displays, just basic gauges, and it lacked any distinct character that might have made it stand out. It wasn't retro in a charming way, and it wasn't modern enough to feel current. It just existed in a gray area of dullness. The result was predictable. Almost no one wanted it. By 2022, sales had fallen below 1,000 units, and even those numbers were largely padded by rental companies buying them in bulk simply because they needed inventory. On the consumer side, there was little interest, and online it barely made a ripple. The bike didn't get promotion, it wasn't displayed prominently, and when it came to an end, there wasn't even an announcement to mark its departure. By early 2024, the Softail Standard was officially discontinued, slipping away without much notice. It was quickly overshadowed by more distinctive models like the Lowrider S and the Fat Boy, motorcycles that at least carried some identity and drew attention. The Softail Standard, by contrast, simply came and went, leaving behind almost no impression at all. But this isn't just about one failed model. It's part of a much bigger struggle for Harley-Davidson. The company is making dramatic cuts, dropping bikes that don't sell, and doubling down on touring motorcycles, trikes, and high-priced CVO models. Those still have a market with older, wealthier riders, but the broader picture is clear. Harley isn't just tweaking its lineup, it's fighting for survival in an industry where its cultural relevance is slipping fast. Modernization has turned into a real challenge. Models like the Livewire, the Pan America, and the Street Series left longtime Harley fans scratching their heads, while failing to pull in the younger buyers the company was aiming for. Instead of bridging the gap between heritage and progress, Harley-Davidson is stuck in the middle, not delivering on either side. The numbers make the problem even clearer. Sales to young adults between 18 and 34 dropped by 25% from 2018 to 2023, a steep decline that shows how much ground the brand is losing with the very audience it needs to survive. The generational divide is obvious. Older riders might still feel nostalgic about Harley-Davidson, but younger people don't see the same appeal. They're not looking for bulky, expensive machines tied to a certain image of rebellion. They want vehicles that are practical, affordable to maintain, and equipped with the modern features they expect in everything they buy. That's where Harley has missed the mark. Several of these newer models have quietly been pulled off the production line, and though their endings weren't announced with much fanfare, the silence says everything. Their disappearance is a sign that Harley-Davidson's cultural relevance is slipping away, and if the company doesn't make bold changes soon, it's not just individual bikes at risk. The entire brand could vanish. The company's lack of effort in marketing only added to the decline. Take one of these models as an example. It was barely shown on Harley-Davidson's website, rarely featured on social media, and almost never given a spotlight in advertising campaigns. When 2024 rolled around, the bike was simply gone, phased out without ceremony, almost like a side character written out of a story no one remembers. And while some motorcycles fade quietly into history, the absence of these models is more like a warning. Every one of these disappearances reflects the same truth. Harley-Davidson is losing its grip on culture. Unless they find a way to reinvent themselves and speak to a new generation, it won't just be a few models that disappear. The entire legacy of the company could fade into history.